the squad leader stuff with him. But my squad leader was an animal. I told you before, like I'm a pretty chill. I'm a pretty chill guy. Like I turn on the aggression, especially with new guys and stuff. But I'm not like naturally super hostile person. My squad leader was. He was awesome, man. But he's a savage. So it seems really hostile, like when you're a new guy. Like, gosh, they hate me and they want me gone. And it's like, maybe we do. We want you to square yourself away, and if not, then we want you gone. Let me tell you something. I got the chafing when I got out there. I don't know why. If I recall, I wasn't wearing underwear. But for whatever reason, it was probably a variety of things. But I'd never had chafing that bad. It was like the tip of my dick was like
Yep.
chafed off. Just the
Yep.
tip was like, dude, it was so bad when we got out there. It was so bad, like it was excruciating if my BDUs freaking like touch my dick. I was like, I'm trying to walk and like hold my pants so they don't touch anything. By yourself in the woods in the middle of the night, like there's nothing. You're not drawing on anything except what you got between your legs and in your gut, pretty much. That's it. What's worse? What's harder, like SEAL training or Ranger selection or Ranger school? And it's super interesting to me because honestly, they're both like horrible, but actually like in very different ways. They're the way I try to describe it because of things like that. Like you're in buds, you're always in a team group. There's not as, at least on the front end, the first part of it, there's not as much that's really like individual. It's on, you're by yourself out there and it's on you. What you got? There's not as much of that. So you can rely a little bit more on the guys around you, and you get a lot of food. You get a lot of food and you're off at night. So we were getting like the food at Chow. And then me and Josh and Aaron and the guys were going out afterwards to La Salsa, and we're getting 1-pound burritos as well. We got a fridge stock. So you're getting a ton of food. And you get most of the time, you get a decent amount of sleep.
Yep.
It's a little bit restricted, but then when you have night operations, you get less. But it's like you're not typically going on like 1 to 3 hours on the regular. So it's a lot. The way I describe it, it's like both of them are kind of like getting punched in the nuts. Buds is more like Jean-Claude Van Damme just winding up and doing the like the really like the pile driver, and then the Ranger stuff is a little bit more like it's a little bit more gentle, but it's a little bit more like a speed bag going on where they're just that's kind of the dynamic. It's like the grind. I think what was asked of you was like harder and more intense at Buds, but the grind and the suck was harder and more intense in like the Ranger stuff I did. That's 08, January 09. I do the warrior transition course from the Navy to the Army. That was in Fort Sill. And then I go to Fort Benning. I do infantry school. So to tie off this little story, I ended up going through the entire pipeline, and I'm getting ready to deploy with Ranger Battalion the first time, right when he's finishing up the Q course. And he calls me at one point, and he was like, "Damn, dude." He's like, "I wish I'd gone Ranger back." he ended up so he made it in, he just retired last year from SF group. But yeah, we both kind of started that process right around the same time, and the timeline of that particular pipeline, I think, was, it's a long pipeline, but it's still a kick in the nuts when you got to do freaking 18 months there or whatever. So I was blessed that the Ranger pipeline, even though mine was more condensed because I had to do a lot of things in sequence, but it's still a lot more expeditious. Warrior transition course, which was like prior service going into the Army.
Okay.
That's Fort Sill, which is it was a kind of reduced basic training. They don't really sweat a lot of the stuff, the real fundamental boot camp type stuff that everybody already knows who's been in, how to fold your clothes and shit like that. So it was more Army specific. That was Fort Sill. Now they were trying to get me to do option 40, and this is where some of the experience that I had acquired up till this point in the Navy, including a little bit of know-how on like shiesty operations, was beginning to take effect now, because I knew enough about how the military worked. They're like, "Oh, you need to get this option 40." I was like, "No, I don't." Dude's gonna come down and be like, "Who wants to go here?" And I'm gonna stand up. So I started that. I was an honor graduate there at Fort Sill with that class. I started at this point where the Army has, you do one thing and then they send you your orders, and you're usually on hold for a few days to a week maybe, and then you go to the next thing. But they have all these different groups, and they're on a constant rotation. right? And so what I started doing, I started this at Fort Sill. When I got there, we did in processing, and then there was one group that was going and starting like the next morning, and then there's another group that was like 3 days later, and we were doing this or that or whatever. But so I went, and in the morning I got up and I got in the formation with the group that was leaving, and I had all my stuff and everything, and they marched us over there and got in there, give me your orders, doing this. And I'm like, oh, like somebody took my orders, in the bus or whatever. They're like, oh, you don't have it. Like, what's your name? All right, Sergeant Trumbo. And they put it in. I'm like, okay. And so I just started with that group, and I kind of did that almost every time. And I was just like bypassing a lot of the waiting stuff. So I went from there. Then we went to Fort Benning. I did infantry basic at Fort Benning. And then from Fort Benning to airborne school was the same thing. There's supposed to be, I think, a week or two hold, but there was like a group leaving the next morning, and I just went out and stood in that formation and got on the bus with them, went over there. Like, they told me to come over here. I don't know who told me, like, what do I need, orders? Shit. Like, they didn't tell me that. And they're like, all right, what's your name? And so I started airborne school. And then at the end of airborne school, the dudes come down from the brown fence, and all right, who wants to go to Ranger selection? And at this point, I'm only kind of I understood what Ranger Battalion was, and that's what I wanted to do. And I was only just now kind of getting into an understanding that, like, that's actually something different from Ranger school. But I also knew that, okay, but if I go there because I'm an E5, I have to go to Ranger school as well. So I got in that formation, ran over to the brown fence, and I was in RIP hold I was one of the last RIP classes in 2009 before they switched it to RASP. So I was in RIP hold for a hot minute. I think that was like 3 weeks. We're pretty much just like sweeping sand or sweeping gravel for like 3 weeks.
But now let me ask you this. Now, you've been in the Army a little bit. Were you in good shape? Were you in like really good shape?
Yeah. I was training because I wanted to do the pipeline. I was training before I got out of the Navy and switching over. I was doing a lot of running. I was doing a bit of rucking as well. Yeah, I was in good shape, and because of the pipeline I came in, so I didn't do like the first brand new guy initial phase of boot camp is that you do in the Army. I didn't have to do that because I did the WTC instead. So, which was a more relaxed training, and most people there are already like at NCOs or at least E4s, with prior service. So it's a lot more relaxed. So I was going out with guys who, when we get done with training, we're rucking or doing like 12-mile runs in the hills at Fort Sill and things like that. I was hitting it on my own, and I was good.
Gotcha.
And I was also a little bit older and more mature now. So like, I feel like you lose stuff a little bit faster, actually, like when you're like 18. When I was starting out, like I had to stay on it. But like, you get a little bit more into like the older guy stuff, and you kind of get that muscle memory. I've been doing it for a few years now, so yeah, I wasn't struggling with these stuff. And when I got there, I was good to go with it. So I started RIP in the summer. I think we started RIP actually in July. I got there in June, but we started in July, and I did RIP, and that one was, well, that was tough, man. Coal Range especially. So the week at Coal Range was like, I didn't do Hell Week when I was in Buzz. I got dropped a little bit before Hell Week, but the Coal Range was every bit kind of what I was expecting from Hell Week, which was we didn't sleep pretty much the whole week. We got like an hour maybe on like 2 or 3 occasions, but that was it. So you're pretty much running the whole week. And when we go out, we started Coal Range. The first thing you do is a 12-mile ruck out to Coal Range. It's a timed ruck, and then you get out there, and then it starts. It was middle of summer and hot as balls, and so I was booking it. I did a good time on that ruck. Let me tell you something. I got the chafing when I got out there. I don't know why. It was, I think I was, if I recall, I wasn't wearing underwear, but for whatever reason, it was probably a variety of things, but I'd never had chafing that bad. It was like the tip of my dick was like chafed off. Just the tip was like, dude, it was so bad when we got out there. It was so bad, like it was excruciating if my BDUs freaking like touch my dick. I was like, I'm trying to walk and like hold my pants so they don't touch anything. And it wasn't just me, it was like a lot of the dudes when we got out to Coal Range. So we're starting off the very beginning of that, like severely chafed, like in the worst possible way. So then when you're out at Coal Range, it's mostly land nav. So you're doing land nav, night and day land nav evolutions. And this is one of the things, I kind of want to circle back to this later. One of the things that was interesting to me about the Army process, I think SF is like this as well. versus buds is there's kind of an interesting balance between the team evolutions, the team stuff. You also get a lot of solo time. There's a lot of like individual aspects, and they particularly hit it with like rucking and land nav. Well, like when you're doing the land nav, you're by yourself, so you spend a lot of time at Coal Range actually by yourself, but you're self-driving. There's a time hack. You have this much time, you got these points, here's the distance, it's on you. You either going to run it and be on time or not. And so you can get away with a little bit more in a team environment, and you can lean on when you're doing stuff as a group and everyone's in the suck. You have like a certain reserve of like prana or something that you get from that team, that when you're just by yourself in the woods in the middle of the night, like there's nothing. You're not drawing on anything except what you got between your legs and in your gut, pretty much. That's it. And I actually appreciate that. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, but that's all you're doing at Coal Range. You're doing land nav, and then in between land nav stuff, they're just torturing the shit out of you.
So I think, when I always tell the Army dudes are always shocked when they hear, like, we got nights off, right? Like, you at Buds, you're going home at 6:30, unless it's a night evolution, but 7 days out of the week, you're going to be going home at, 6 days out of the week, you're going to be going home at, 6:30.
Yeah.
Was that, like, now, was it still a month? It was like a 6 weeks? RIP was 6 weeks? How long was it?
No, it was 4 weeks. 4-week selection.
So it's 1 month of just absolutely drudgery, but it's around the clock, correct?
It is. It's around the clock. And that's one of the interesting points, because I've had a lot of people, when they find out about my background, who kind of ask me to compare, like, what's worse? What's harder, like SEAL training or Ranger selection or Ranger school? And it's super interesting to me, because honestly, they're both like horrible, but actually like in very different ways. The way I try to describe it, because of things like that, like you're in Buds, you're always in a team group. There's not as, at least on the front end, the first part of it, there's not as much that's really like individual. It's on, you're by yourself out there and it's on you. What you got? There's not as much of that. So you can rely a little bit more on the guys around you, and you get a lot of food. You get a lot of food, and you're off at night. So we were getting like the food at Chow. And then me and Josh and Aaron and the guys were going out afterwards to La Salsa, and we're getting 1-pound burritos as well. We got a fridge stock. So you're getting a ton of food, and you get most of the time, you get a decent amount of sleep.
Yep.
It's a little bit restricted, but then when you have night operations, you get less. But it's like you're not typically going on like 1 to 3 hours on the regular, so it's a lot. The way I describe it, it's like both of them are kind of like getting punched in the nuts. Buds is more like Jean-Claude Van Damme just winding up and doing the like the really like the pile driver, and then the Ranger stuff is a little bit more like, it's a little bit more gentle, but it's a little bit more like a speed bag going on, where they're just that's kind of the dynamic. It's like the grind. I think what was asked of you was like harder and more intense at Buds, but the grind and the suck was harder and more intense in like the Ranger stuff I did. That's kind of how I break it down. Like they were really bad, but in different ways. But Coal Range was pretty much, I think everybody has their moment where there's a certain amount of suck that's pretty universal, whether it's Hell Week or Coal Range. Like they're using all the same tools, and it's, that was no fun. So we had all that on top of like the worst chafing ever, and all the little games that go with that. I told you last time, excuse me, that when I was in Buds, the thing that kicked my ass the most was the log PT, right? So the last night at Coal Range, they had logs out there, and you do quite a bit of log PT. And I was almost laughing about it, because the last night at Coal Range, there's this big ass field next to the training area. It's like, I want to say like a quarter mile from one end to the wood line, and you're hitting the wood line all the time. But the field is huge, and the wood line goes all the way around. So the perimeter is over a mile, I think. It's probably close to 1.5 miles. It's a big ass field. And they had us, the last night at Coal Range, they had us get the logs up. So our squad, each squad has a log, and we're doing log PT for a minute. And then they had us just shoulder carry it and jog around that field in laps. And they had us sing the national anthem at the top of our lungs. They're like, "You motherfuckers better be loud for my flag." And so we're singing, we're screaming the national anthem, carrying these logs around the field over and over and over and over. We did that the entire night. They literally just kept us doing that the whole night for like 8 hours. We're freaking running in circles with those logs. Yeah, like halfway through the night, I was just remembering buds and like, gosh, I hate logs. But again, I've been weightlifting a lot when I was in the Navy. A lot of that's it wasn't quite the experience that I had when I was 18. First time in it, having done no weight training. So yeah, the logs are no joke, and they have them in the Army too. So don't think you're gonna join the Army and get out of log PT. They're gonna get you with them.
So it sounds like, how old are you right now? 28? Like you're 28 at this time?
No,
27?
I was 20. Let's see, this was 2009. I was 24.
Okay, so you're 24, but you had 6 years of full Navy under your belt now.
Yeah, like 5.5. I didn't end up doing the full 6, but about five and a
Do
half
you
years.
do you think? Let me ask you this way: how much? Put it in a percentage of help you got with those extra 5.5 years in the Navy going through a special operations selection compared to when you were 18 or 17. You got there, you were 17. What, like, just talk about it, like, from a percentage basis. How big a difference did that 5.5 years make? Because it sounds to me like you were like, oh yeah, it sucked, it was tough, like a typical dude that's made it through SEAL training, right? Like, yeah, it was fucking awful, it sucked, but you got to do what you got to do to get to where you want to go. Whereas the first time when you were in SEAL training, there were some things that were happening, and you was like kind of looking around like a deer in the headlights.
But yeah, I had some shell shock moments there because I was just that young and inexperienced. I don't know. I mean, it's speculative because I didn't get that far into buds. I was only there. I was only in first phase for 2 weeks, so I have a very limited kind of data set to draw from. My sense is so there's like a whole buffet of qualities really that you need to be successful. And I had a lot of those in place, or I had some of those in place the first time when I was young. And I don't really know how well I had some of them in place at that point. My guess is as it had gone on, I think from where I was in my head at the time, it probably would have been more and more kind of shell shock moments had I progressed through that training and actually like if I had made it far into training or even graduated, kind of hitting this back end stuff that's not on your radar, like at the end of training, QT or like new guy in the teams when I was like 18. I don't know. I don't know like how much, I don't know how I would have handled that. I don't know if I had the tools in place. I can't say.
Yep.
So there's definitely some of that. I feel like the maturity, honestly, like the disappointment and kind of get the frustration I had to endure in the Navy, I think was kind of helpful to some degree because, that was I guess like learning to take hits, man, like learning to get defeated and just part of that's patience. When I was 17, 18, I'm like, I just got to get it done and realizing like, hey man, shit takes time. And like you might get hurt and now you're waiting 6 months and now you're doing this and now it's going to take a year. And that's just how it is. It's not a big deal. Like a year in this thing, that's not a big deal. And you just don't get that when you're young. But I had enough of that. I had enough frustration and freaking waiting around and all that stuff. So that definitely was a factor. That helped a lot, I think, the maturity. It was still a learning curve, though, because even then, when I graduated RIP, there's still a learning curve, too, because I'm still coming into a special operations regiment as a new guy. But I'm not a private. So I'm a new guy who's like got some rank, some time, but no combat experience. So it was like a different kind of new guy. So the whole dynamic is even different there. And even that was, so I told you I've been just like kind of sua sponte in the different, like, you guys are leaving, next week or whatever. And I would just go over to where I was supposed to go and just kind of jump in. So I did that when I graduated RIP as well. I was supposed to, the graduating class, I was one of, I think, 4 guys in the class that graduated. And I think I was the only, there was one other infantry E5. And there was one guy who was a parachute rigger and a supply dude. So me and one other infantry E5, we graduated and we were supposed to go to battalion after like the Monday after graduation and check in and do in processing and all that. And I remember like being kind of, I'll say, vaguely aware that was what was supposed to happen. It wasn't, I wasn't super like trying to buck the, like, I'm not doing that. In my memory, it was like, I think this is what happens next. Like you go and check in. But I also knew that you have to get your tab, you know, to be in battalion if you're E4 or above. So I knew I had to do that. I had to go to Ranger school. There was a pre-Ranger class that was starting that Monday. So I just jumped in that pre-Ranger class, and
So you didn't even report. You just
I
said,
didn't even
"Nah, I'm gonna
report.
go to Ranger
I
School."
went, well, and so in retrospect, I think that was probably actually a bigger deal than I realized. I ended up hearing about it when I did get to battalion eventually, but in my mind, it wasn't a big deal. I was like, I got to go anyway. What am I do? I'm going to check in, and they'll be like, oh, you need a tab, and then they're going to send me. So the only difference is like there's going to be probably like 3 or 4 weeks of sitting around freaking waiting for some class to class up. I'm going to be supervising private sweeping rocks again. They're starting Monday. Let me just jump in. It wasn't a big deal in my mind, but I heard when I ended up getting to battalion, I did hear about it. So I just jumped in there. I did pre-ranger, which is it's called a small unit ranger tactics cert. It's basically like a little 2-week. It's a lot of land nav, a lot of mission planning. You know, like how mission planning works, because that's pretty much all you're doing in ranger school, and then some patrols and stuff. So I did that. This is the first time that the heat thing actually caught up to me, because this is all in the summer. I went through cert once. Right at the end of cert, we were supposed to then start ranger school the following week, but that was the last summer class of ranger school, was the one the following week. So one of the medics comes in like right in the end of cert, and they're like, Trumbo, you're supposed to class up, but you have this heat stroke in your record, so you're not supposed to go in a summer class. Their guidelines were if you have a heat injury, you know, you have to do a non-summer class. So this is the last summer class, so you basically got to wait this one out. And so they're like, well, your options are, why don't you just do cert again? You know, like I passed everything, but they're like, do another round of cert, you know, get some reps, and then you can class up with the group after that. So I did cert second time, and at that point I had like I had done rip and then cert again, which is all on the same land nav course. So I'm like pretty solid on this land nav course by this time. I'm like running to point. I already know where that point is, you know. So I was crushing it. And then I went to Ranger school after that. So this whole thing, the first year almost I was in the Army. Yeah, the first year it was all pipeline. It was infantry school, airborne school, RIP, cert, and then Ranger school. So I go to Ranger school. I got rolled in first phase the first time with we had an exchange student, a Singaporean lieutenant in our class, in my squad. When you're doing like the squad level missions in the first phase, and this dude was all laid up, and so we ended up no going that patrol. That was the last patrol. I got rolled over that, recycled, and then I went straight through after that. So I graduated in the winter of 2010, into January. No, yeah, I think it's January, end of January 2010. So that was kind of the pipeline.
Did you have some heat problems or no? They just called you on heat stroke. Okay, that's good.
I never had. I did 4 deployments to Afghanistan after that, and then a bunch more on the civilian side to Iraq and Africa. I never had any heat problems ever, and so that goes back to like when I was doing the test. I was like, dude, I know I'm not redlining. I know how I feel when I'm sucking and I'm not sucking. So
yeah,
like I said, I had that confidence from then that like the heat is not the issue for me individually. That, you know, organizationally they're thinking it. I understand why those things are in place, but I was just like, it's not. I'm not applying that to myself. I know it's not an issue. I never had any problems with it. So in RIP, I mean, there were dudes stroking out a lot, and there was even a mortar guy who they really didn't like. I was friends with him later in battalion. He was a real funny dude. But when we were in RIP, they like, you know how it is. Like somebody does something once or says something once, and there's like a whole section of the cadre that's like, oh, that motherfucker. And then he's got a target on him after that. They're not necessarily going to get rid of him, but they're going to make his life hell. And so he was that guy. I forget what it was, but they picked him for something. So they, at one point, I think maybe he was going down for a heat exhaustion at one point, but they gave him the old thermometer, rotted him off the range, you know? And he got so upset about that. He was like freaked out about it. And he was okay, but they made a point after that. I think they got him literally almost every day at PT. They called the medics over. They go up to him. They'd be like, Conway, you're looking kind of red. And he's like, I'm good, Sergeant. I'm fine. And they're like, no, man, you're sweating a lot. Like, take a knee, brother. And he's like, He's like, let's go. I'm good. And they're like, no, you look at medic. And he's like, no. They bring the medic over to be like, check. So he got rotted off the range, I think every day for like 2 weeks. And he was like, man, this is just, and we're doing rucks. We're doing it. Like they get him wherever they could. So they're just fucking with him. But he ended up graduating. He ended up going to mortar squad. But yeah.
So they're playing games.
Playing games, but I never had any problems with the heat after that. That's not to say
so Ranger School
sucking plenty, on the rocks.
Yeah,
and stuff, but
I mean,
never like redlining it.
So you go to Ranger School. You kind of walk through Ranger School because you didn't say much about it, right? It sucked. They didn't feed you. You just kept walking.
Rangers, it sucked bad. That's I think the coldest I've ever been. I ended up because I recycled once, and I ended up in the winter class. And dude, mountain phase. It was December, and it was like, I think it rained. However many days we were in the field, there were only like 2 days that we were out on patrol that it didn't rain. It was raining every single day, and it was cold. It was like in the mid-50s pretty much all the time. So it was cold enough to rain on us and not snow. It did snow once.
I got 3.
All right. I got 9 kids. I got 6 boys.
Wait, you have 9 kids right now? Like your kids?
I got 9 kids right now. Yeah.
Motherfucker, your wife had 9 kids?
Yeah.
Dude, I thought you were running a school for 9 kids. I thought you had other kids. Man.
Okay. I have 9 kids. I have 6 boys. Four teenagers. Well, 3 teenagers and 1 almost teenager. I had 4 boys right in a row. So after my oldest daughter was born, that first deployment in the Navy, we kept having them. I'm Catholic, so we kept having them. I had 4 boys right in a row that are all. One of them's graduating, but they're all kind of in the high school bracket right now.
Okay.
But right. Yeah, just
you are an anomaly. Like, we're gonna have to talk about that.
Little guys running around and stuff. Like yeah that's why I'm at. That's why I'm at Grandpa's house right now.
We're gonna have to talk about that too, because I definitely want to pick your brain on how you managed to pull that off. But okay, so you get done with Ranger School, you go check in the 3rd Ranger Bat at this point.
Yep. So I check in over there.
How was the check-in process?
It was interesting. So I don't know. Like I said, I was coming in as now a tabbed E5, okay, but I'm prior Navy. So there were other there were E5s who were coming to the regiment as E5s with time. They're coming from infantry primarily, So they kind of didn't really know what to do with me. They're like, so you're a sergeant, you're tabbed, but also you're like a new guy, like really a new guy. Not just new, but like you don't know shit and you haven't done shit. And so it was a cult. It was a weird kind of cultural thing to navigate for me and for them. They weren't quite. I ended up getting assigned to a squad, and I'm basically like I'm like an assistant to the team leader. So I'm kind of like a private, but I'm not a private. They can't like private me up, but. So I'm going to like learn the ropes. So I start off. I get assigned to a line squad first.
Did you get beat up?
Not the way privates do. No.
Okay, so they didn't make you fight on day 1 or nothing crazy.
No, they got in my shit a lot. I didn't have to fight anybody. Not that time. I did eventually. I mean, that's the kind of the team life, But it wasn't. It was different. It was a different kind of like hazing type situation then, and that's what I mean. Like, I don't think they quite knew exactly how to play it, even because I'm coming from. Because you don't do that with, say, you get like a sergeant who's coming from like 82nd or something like that, coming into battalion, where they're a new guy, but they got team leader time. They're infantry. Probably have a deployment or 2 under their belt. Like they're a new guy, but it's not the same like hazing type situation you get. And even the probation is a little bit different. You're on probation when you get there, regardless. And you can always be dropped at any moment. You can be RFS for anything, and that's kind of regardless of rank. It's also a little bit different than from like a brand new private who doesn't know jack. So you're expecting the private to be ate up a little bit. So you're going hard on them to start corralling this kind of stuff, but you're looking for like really big things, and if it's a really big thing, you're RFS. So like when I was a team leader, we had a private that came to my squad, and like the week after RIP, and one of the first things you do in processing, you run him through a PT test. The motherfucker failed a 5-mile run on his first day in battalion, and it's that.
How is that possible though? How does he come out of RIP and fail a 5-mile time run?
Dude was still kind of overweight, and that was the question. It's like, I know you just passed this like a week ago. Like, how are you going to show up? And he didn't just fail it by like 4 seconds. He was like a minute and a half over. It was like, and so it was baffling. Now this was like the first couple of classes of RASP, when they just switched from RIP to RASP. Like maybe first year. No, I guess it was about a year and a half they've been doing. I don't know. It was.
Had you done a deployment yet?
Yeah.
You'd already done a deployment with the Rangers.
Right. So my first deployment, like I said, I was attached first to a line squad, and I was kind of just like bitch duty, but it was like learning the ropes. I was bitch duty, but like not the private bitch duty. So you can like, I was essentially like basically like a tab spec 4 was kind of the role I was put into, but also with a little bit of new guy pressure as well. And then when we deployed, the first deployment I did to Kandahar, that was 2010. And when we deployed, I got kind of like bumped up to like a corporal role. So then I was a gun team leader for my first deployment. And then after my first deployment, I got bumped up to line team. And then I was a team leader for the next 3 deployments. Yeah, but
did you make?
I got out. I was like right at the when I got out of the Army, I was like set to make E6, and I would have had to make E6 basically if I had stayed in. But I'd made the decision to get out after those 4 years, so I didn't end up making E6 while I was in.
So back to Fox that's out of shape. Did you guys just get rid of him immediately?
Not quite immediately. He was there for a couple weeks. We ran him through. Well, when he got there, I was acting squad. My squad leader was out. He was doing pro dev or something. He was gone for like 2 weeks. So I was running the squad at that time. He came in, and so I was just doing all the squad leader stuff with him. But my squad leader was an animal. I told you before, like I'm a pretty chill. I'm a pretty chill guy. Like I turn on the aggression, especially with new guys and stuff. But I'm not like naturally super hostile person. My squad leader was. He was awesome, man. But he was a savage. So this kid shows up, and I just do the normal stuff. I'm like, all right, throw your shit over here, do this, do that. We're going to run you through a PT test, and we're going to do this, draw weapons. I'm going to put you through the basic stuff. And I wasn't like coming down on him or trying to fuck with him or anything. I was just doing the normal stuff. And he failed the 5-mile run. And like pretty significantly. So that's when I was like, wait a minute, what the fuck? And I started getting in his ass about it. And I was like, dude, you don't understand. You don't understand how lucky you are that Sergeant P is not here. Because if he was here, he'd be ripping you apart right now. So I'm gonna smoke you up. You're gonna be in here tomorrow morning, and you're running a 5-mile time run again. And then you're gonna be in the day after that, and you're doing a 5-mile time run again. And you're gonna do that every day. And you better pray that you're passing that shit comfortably by the time Sergeant P gets back next week. So I don't know. Maybe you had a bad day. I don't know, but. So yeah, we ran him through it, and then he did pass it, but he was just kind of ate up, man. He was like, yeah, he was only there for I think 2 weeks. Sergeant P did get back, and we were all kind of climbing this kid's ass every day. And it seems really hostile, like when you're a new guy, like gosh, they hate me and they want me gone. And it's like, maybe we do. We want you to square yourself away. And if not, then we want you gone. But like, we're jumping in your ass because this is actually kind of your last chance to like get yourself un-ate up. And that was I was beating his ass a little bit, but I wasn't trying to like you need to be able to pass this. I'm not trying to make it so that you can't. You need to do it. And so he just wasn't. He ended up getting RFS I think 2 weeks in. So yeah, there's an intensity there, with the new guys, and it feels very targeted. But it's really just a kind of common sense approach because you don't have a lot of time to get them up to speed. They need to be up to speed. And so you're correcting things that maybe are not egregious, but you're correcting them in a very egregious way so that lesson sticks because you only want to do a correction once. So a lot of the method to the madness is like, there's still a weed out process. Like if you're ate up and you're getting hammered, if getting hammered breaks you off to the point that you like want to leave or you're just not showing up to perform anymore, that mentally breaks you off, then A, you don't need to be there. But B, also if you can't fix yourself, within a reasonable amount of applied pressure, this is the standard, motherfucker. And here it is. And like, you're going to get beat until you can meet the standard. If you can't do that fairly quickly, then yeah, you also don't need to be there. So like I remember, and a lot of this stuff for me coming from the Navy, a lot of the learning curve, the experience for me was like learning this whole like environment, the whole social dynamic in a place like that, because it's very different. It's different from the fleet. It's probably not that different from the teams, but again, I was never in the teams. Even then, it was just like really kind of understanding this process from the inside was still a learning curve for me as well, kind of growing into that, which was a lot of fun. It was very interesting, but I had to develop my own aggression really, like quite a bit. So my first deployment when I'll do a quick little war story. My first deployment in Kandahar, I was still attached to the rifle squad, and we hit a target, and it was a night. There were like confirmed. There were confirmed enemy on target. This was like an enemy compound. It wasn't really an unknown. Like we knew the dudes we were looking for were there. We'd seen them going there, so we knew they were there. And we were going in, but we did an infill, pretty good size infill. So they didn't hear us coming in or anything like that. It was still silent going in. And I was going to clear one of the outbuildings. They were in several different outbuildings, and I go to the door, and it was just a doorway. There was nothing on the door, right? So I can see into the room in night vision, and there's a guy in there asleep on the floor in kind of the back left corner. And I'm outside the room, and I'm sweeping, before I clear in, and there's a PKM leaned up against the wall on the other wall. And so this is one of the maybe like third or fourth mission out. This is pretty early on. We weren't in contact yet. Everybody on target was still asleep as far as we knew, but we knew we were going to like ball them up or smoke them. And so it hadn't kicked off yet, but I'm still very new and like adapting to the whole environment and everything. So what I have in my head is a lot of the training, the freaking like 1,000 ROE briefs and this and that and the other. And so I'm looking in there, see this dude sleeping on the floor. And in my little checklist brain, I'm like, okay, so he's not actively engaging me right now. Like I'm gonna go take him down. So I enter the room, like clear the corner, and then I'm driving to him to zip cuff him, And I get like halfway into the room. I was the one man. I get like halfway into the room, and my squad leader comes blasting past, like throws me into the wall and comes blasting past me and just like stomps the dude's face. The guy's just sleeping there like that. He just stomps the dude's face, then freaking like football punts him. And for a second, I'm just kind of standing there watching, like, what the fuck is going on? Football punts his face, blows his teeth into the wall and everything. And another dude's on him, and they're like throwing cuffs on him and everything. As soon as they get him like contained, he wheels around, whips his nods up, and gets right up in my face like this. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Why didn't you smoke that motherfucker?" And I was like, like, Sergeant, I was like, he was asleep. He's like, "Do you know he was asleep? Do you know he had an S-vest on? Do you know he didn't have an S-vest on?" He's like, you saw the gun in here, right? I'm like, "Roger." He's like, "Motherfucker's a combatant. He's a threat." I'm like, he wasn't shooting at me. He's like, "You gonna wait for him to shoot you?" He's like in my face screaming at me. And it was just like, oh, I'm like, all right. Like I have to take this up a notch. I'm trying to do things very procedurally, And so there was like a learning curve like that, like my first deployment, especially where I was getting into it. Like I had to like ramp that up and kind of learn the proper settings for those dynamics. You get new guy settings and like, deployment settings and things like that. So yeah, it's things like that where I had a maturity level at that point that like allowed me to do that fairly well. Whereas when I was 18, if I was in that same kind of mode at Buds, if I'd gone all the way through that, I don't know how well, how like instinctive, or simple a lot of those things would have been.
So the first thing that comes to mind is this is your first combat deployment, right? But you've been in training for a full year. How was the wife doing at this point?
Dude, she's a champion. She's been, like I said, I've known her forever. We've been real close for a long time before I was ever in the military. And she's always known like what my passion is, that like this is what I'm going. She's always been there 100% like supporting that and all about it. And like she wanted that. She loved the life. Like the military life she was awesome. It was like, yeah, it was a perfect. Obviously, it's not perfect because I have kids and I'm gone all the time, so it's never a perfect situation. But as far as sort of the military spouse family situation goes, I don't think it could have been much better than it was. She was 100% on board the whole time and like really really awesome. She's very independent too. So like when I'm gone all the time, she doesn't have a problem like running the household and doing her thing either. She's not sitting around waiting for me to get home or anything like that. So,
were you doing 3-month deployments then? How long was your deployment?
Yeah, first deployment was 4 months, but yeah, 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like the divorce rate's 98%. And, it's Nate over on Valhalla VFT came in with a wife, right? And she left in the middle of the Q course. So it's always interesting, like you're a unicorn, right? Like they don't last, right? Like the
Right.
wives don't last.
Yeah. It was
Awesome.
it was a very yeah. I feel like it was kind of a special situation, and it was because we had a really close, long standing connection well before the military, So and so nothing was ever like surprising to her. She knew what I was wanting to do. She was there with me the whole time I was in the Navy, all the frustrations and freaking everything. And so it wasn't like, well, babe, I'm going to be gone all the time, or like, I can't do this with you, or this came up and I don't know what's going on, but none of that was ever surprising to her either. So she was kind of coming into it in a really good way. So yeah, it was not normal, but it was pretty easy on my end. Like it was just very natural. So
Gotcha.
it was good.
Gotcha. So you do 3 more deployments with the Rangers. What was kind of the precipice for you to get out? Like what was the
Oh man. It was so the time I got out in 2013, and from like 2012 onward, a little bit while I was deployed with battalion. So I did 4 deployments with battalion in Kandahar. I did down south at Bastion, JBAD, and then Wardak at the end. And some of the stuff that was going on overseas at the time, like higher up stuff having to do with battle space commanders, political stuff, that was kind of trending in certain directions that I wasn't super into. There were also organizational things, and everything I'm talking about has always been like organizational. Like I have a big beef with the Navy, but it's like big Navy. I never have a problem with the SEAL teams or any particular thing, but it's just like the capital N Navy. And it was the same thing. There was a lot of issues towards the end of my Army enlistment that were like, I loved regiment. I loved everything about regiment, and I had a blast there. That was the best job I've ever had. And when I got out, nothing that contributed to the decision to get out had anything to do really with regiment. It was like, it's awesome, but regiment is part of the Army, and there's bigger things, and the shit that floats in these bigger things does float downstream to regiment eventually. Oftentimes they're a little bit more umbrellaed than average. There's some things that might take a little longer or not really hit as hard, but they can't avoid it altogether. So there were more and more of those things on the horizon and overseas, and I was right at like 10 years, 10 and a half years. So if I enlisted again at that point, I was thinking like I might as well stay and do 20. It doesn't make any sense to do like 14 years. So I was like, if I'm gonna get out, it should be now. And at the time, then right at that 2012, 2013 time, it was just I was looking ahead at like a potential 10 years in the future, and there's so many different kinds of things on the horizon that it's like I don't really want to deal with that.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be moving into like a platoon sergeant position, what kinds of things am I potentially might have to be looking at dealing with as like a platoon sergeant in the next 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, and that was before like weird mandates and things were coming down later on, which some of my buddies who are still in had to deal with a few years ago. I was just cognizant of those things. So on the organizational end, those were elements, some stuff that went down overseas, which again, not regimental stuff. It was all way above their heads, but like battle space stuff and political. We, doing a mission, 7-click infill over a mountain range to ball up a shadow governor who knows somebody in somewhere. And then we get back and then we get the word the next day, like, oh, you got to let that dude go. It's like, well, what did why did we just do all this? I'm taking my guys out every night and putting them in harm's way. There's just questionable stuff that didn't have anything to do with my unit. It was just the nature of the war at that time that I wasn't thrilled about. Plus the family side. I now have 5 kids and I'm gone all the time. And, that is tough on the family. I did want to be, my oldest kids were getting to be school aged at that time. And so I wanted to be like more involved on the home end. It's not as big a deal when they're like 1 or 2, like what. But now they're 5, 6, 7, and you kind of are needed more. And so
I punched out of coaching.
Yeah.
I had a first grader, I had a third grader, and a first grader, and a kid getting ready to go to kindergarten. My wife is like, "Look, we gone.
Yeah,
So that,
it's harder to justify all that time away when they're getting
yeah,
older like that. Like you got to
you
do
know,
more with
and
them
I
and
just
grow
said
into them.
okay, and honestly, it's been awesome,
Yeah.
right? Like I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't like had an opportunity to go back into coaching 2 years ago. I had an opportunity to go the year after I left.
Hmm.
And I just say, I'm raising boys right now. Like, we're going to get off this podcast. I'm going to go to the YMCA. They're going to run laps on the slide for an hour and a half, 2 hours. We're going to come home. We chopped trees for the last, kind of like you, probably not as good as you, but we chopped trees for the last week, right? And we got a lot of hard manual labor in, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's the ticket, man. The boys need that.
So okay, so you made a decision, you got out of the army, but you didn't really put the gun down, correct?
Not exactly. I bounced. I tried a couple different things. I honestly I didn't have a great exit plan when I got out. I've always, you might have gathered, I'm a little bit of a seat on my pants kind of guy. Like
So
I
let me ask
send
you,
it.
did you drink a lot? Do you drink? You don't take me as no. The only reason I ask that because you don't take me as one of the dudes that's fucking slamming beers all day with 5 fucking kids and then you're fucking drunk half the day. So I asked the question because I know a lot of dudes struggle when they get out and they chase the bottle, right? I call it the bottle in the lab, right? They got a black lab or
Yeah.
fucking golden retriever and they fucking got a bottle.
Now I will say I did a little bit the first time after I got dropped from Buds. I, I was underage at the time, but that's not really if you're resourceful, it's not really much of a problem. But that was just because like my attitude was so bad and I hated the fleet. But that wasn't like a long standing thing. That was just like a little kind of blip on the radar. But no, I never had a hard time with that stuff. But I just yeah. So I got out. I built a tiny house on a trailer. The last like 9 months I was in the army, like weekends and stuff, or at night I would come home and I'd work on it a little bit. So I built a little house on a trailer. I had a house in Fort Benning. When I got out, we sold the house. We loaded the trailer and we drove. And so the first year I was out, we literally were like gypsy, like van life with 5 kids living in a little house in a trailer that I had built just for kind of event. It was like adventure. I just wanted to like try it, and I didn't have a plan yet per se. So I was like making stuff on the side for money, but we lived really on the road. We had no real needs, but that was interesting and uncomfortable. But we wanted to try it. I was like, let's see how small we can go.